Popsicles, sprinklers, a cool breeze. Talk about refreshing. You know what else is refreshing this summer? A brand new phone with Verizon. Yep, get a new phone on any plan with Select Phone Trade-in and My Plan. And lock down a low price for 3 years on any plan with My Plan. This is a deal for everyone, whether you're a new or existing customer. Swing by Verizon today for our best phone deals. 3-year price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate only. Additional terms and conditions apply for all offers.
Starting a business can be overwhelming. You're juggling multiple roles: designer, marketer, logistics manager, all while bringing your vision to life. But for millions of businesses, Shopify is the ultimate partner. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world. And 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. From household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Build a stunning online store with Shopify's ready-to-use templates. Boost content with AI-powered product descriptions, page headlines, and enhanced photography. Marketing is easy with built-in tools for email and social media campaigns. Plus, Shopify simplifies everything from inventory to shipping and returns. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try. Shopify.com/try.
Hello and welcome to mini episode number 461 of Real Life Ghost Stories. And I have 2 spooky stories for you today, and the last story comes from the 17th of April 2025. And story number 1 comes from Zara. I grew up in a very rural part of Meath in Ireland. My parents moved down from Dublin with me and my older brother in 2000, where they bought a tiny cottage home surrounded by fields, with neighbours few and far between. The house is built on an old famine road and close to the Hill of Ward, a ring fort dating back to the Iron Age, and then became the site of many other medieval battles, meetings and festivals. Many of the first ghostly encounters in this house I don't remember myself, but are recounted by my parents often. Some of my favourite stories involve a young ghost boy, about 7 or 8 years old, that my parents named Hans. First name basis, on account of his frequent visits. My mum tells me of a story where my younger brother was just a newborn. I was almost 1.5 years old, down in the sitting room in my cot in front of the TV, while my mum was with my brother in the kitchen. As she was working away on whatever task, she began to hear me laugh from down the hall. Not thinking much of it until she realised she could hear 2 voices laughing at the TV. Realising this, she rushed down the hall to see who I was with, and only when she falls through the door does that second laugh stop with no trace of its owner. How she didn't dispose of me immediately I will never understand. A couple of years later, me and my 2 brothers are outside in the garden with my dad. My mum is rounding us up for dinner and walks down the hall to the front door where she'd be passing me and my brother's room. As she passes, she sees a young boy getting into the cot in our room. Presuming it's my brother, she follows after him, only for the cot to be empty, and finds us all at the end of the garden playing away. Following all of this, Hans clearly became much more comfortable, part of the family. Mum tells me of the many, many nights where they would be in bed, and my mum would be reading her book, and in her peripherals, above her book, she would see a young boy, with blonde hair, wearing a short-sleeved shirt, shorts and a pair of braces. When she would look up from her page, he'd be gone. Never was he seen in full view, always just that little bit hidden away from us, but always there. He never felt scary or malicious. He became part of our life in our home, but we always did wonder where he came from. As time went on, it became apparent that Hans wasn't the only person lingering around our home, popping in from time to time. By this point, there was an extension built onto the house, and we'd welcomed yet another brother into our lives. It was around this point that I saw my first and only ghost. I was about 8 or 9 years of age, and we were all sitting down and having a Sunday roast together, and where I was seated I could see through a small window overlooking the garden at the side of our house. I looked up and I saw a man. An old man, in his late 60s perhaps. He had a great big white beard, a big hat and a long brown coat. Thinking nothing of it, but slightly surprised that someone would come to the side of our home and peer through a window at us, I said, "There's a man here." My parents, confused, immediately got up and went out the front door. Dad going onto the road to check for a car, and Mum around the side of the house to check where I had said this man was. At this point, I was still absolutely certain that perhaps a farmer from the area was stopping over, as there are many cows in our area, and they sometimes find their way to our garden for a munch. It was only when they came back inside and told me that there was nobody there that I began to worry. As I said, I live in a rural area on an old famine road. You can see on our straight stretch of road a mile in either direction. No cars, nobody walking, no cycling. From the 30 seconds it took for them to get up and check, we wouldn't have missed a car or a stray man walking around our house. I can still see him as clear as day in my mind's eye. We all remained silent for the rest of dinner, contemplating whether I was crazy or not. I have an endless amount of odd stories here and there, such as the time we were all in the sitting room dancing to Party Rock Anthem that we had just gotten on CD, when all of a sudden the volume turned up full blast. Nobody was by the CD player, and it was on one of those big circle twisty knobs for the volume. My dad rushed over to turn it right back down and just exclaimed, "Well, I guess someone likes the song." And we all carried on like nothing happened. Or the time that we were all heading out for the day when both my parents looked back at the house through the rearview mirror before we departed, and they both saw a woman walk past the window of our hall. A woman wearing a white bonnet and a long old-timey dress. So certain they were that someone, a real-life human, was in the house, that they went back in and checked the place for the stranger only to find nobody, of course. Despite all of this, we rarely ever felt any sort of discomfort or evilness from the experiences. Just unusual things that we couldn't quite place, and we carried on with life. I no longer live at home, and supposedly there's no more reports of anything in a very long time. The house was cleansed in 2014 after the Hill of Ward was excavated and an energy line was found running through our house, and a white witch explained that many people from beyond would pass through here on their journey, some stopping to suss us out. Since then, it's just a house, which I'm sure my parents are more than relieved over. I'm still unsure if I'm a believer or not, despite it all. I do think there are places that are just magical places, and that strange things happen in these magical places. And I feel like the Hill of Ward, ring forts that date back to the Iron Age, places that are deep in the countryside that held a special significance for ancient people. I think that places like that are just magical places. I said the same thing when I was in Leap Castle. Like, whether or not you believe in the paranormal, or even if you're not spiritual, you can feel like a magic in the air in those places. They feel different and otherworldly. And for those who are unaware, a famine road is basically, during the Great Hunger in Ireland, there was this incentive, I suppose, by the British government that was essentially, these people are starving, they need aid, they need intervention, but we can't possibly just give poor people things. What an awful, ridiculous thing to do. So they employed, and I use that word loosely, men to build what they call now famine roads, which were these really long stretches of straight road that were built by people who were starving in order to access food and a means to survive. Some of these roads, these famine roads, literally lead to nowhere. They just stop abruptly. And a huge amount of men, as you can imagine, if you've got people who are starving, malnourished, on the brink, a huge amount of these men died while building these famine roads. So it would make sense that your home was sort of in this perfect circle, you know, this perfect storm of, you've got a hill fort, you've got rural Ireland, you've got a famine road that your house is built on. And I genuinely applaud your family for being sort of like that okay with having this little boy around the house. And I know you said, you know, there was nothing malevolent, there was nothing that felt off in terms of, you know, bad vibes or whatever, but having this wee boy knocking around the house that you called Hans, he must have been like, oh, there's other kids in the house, this is great, you know, because it doesn't even really sound like he was trying to get attention, just sort of hanging out with the other kids and trying to get into the cot and trying to be a child himself. And then again, you have this old man in his 60s with a big white beard and a hat and a long brown coat. Was he possibly like a farmer who had worked the land previously? Was he a man who had worked the famine road? There are just so many possibilities. And it's interesting that during the excavation of the Hill of Ward, that obviously I'd imagine they brought in spiritual advisors, which, you know, might surprise some people listening, but it is an important thing to do. And this witch obviously said there's some sort of energy line or a ley line. I don't really know where I stand with ley lines. Like, I don't really understand what they are, but it wouldn't surprise me if there was some sort of weird natural energy that was allowing these things to appear in your house, these entities to manifest in your house. Before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you about a podcast that I think you'll love. It's called Most Terrifying Places in America from Travel Channel. On the Most Terrifying Places in America, visit some of the creepiest locations across the United States. Go to a hotel in New England where guests wake up with scratches, and head down the back roads in the Midwest where a hitchhiker vanishes mid-sentence. Then meet the spirits of a Texas warship where the dead still walk the decks. On each episode, travel with ghost hunters, psychics and historians as they uncover the chilling truth behind America's paranormal hotspots. It's a podcast that's part cross-country road trip, part ghost tour. If you want deep dives into the most haunted locations in the US with input from experts from across the paranormal spectrum, then this podcast will be right up your street. Listen to Most Terrifying Places in America wherever you get your podcasts.
Popsicles, sprinklers, a cool breeze. Talk about refreshing. You know what else is refreshing this summer? A brand new phone with Verizon. Yep, get a new phone on any plan with Select Phone Trade-in and My Plan. And lock down a low price for 3 years on any plan with My Plan. This is a deal for everyone, whether you're a new or existing customer. Swing by Verizon today for our best phone deals. 3-year price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate only. Additional terms and conditions apply for all offers.
It's that time of year again, back to school season, and Instacart knows that the only thing harder than getting back into the swing of things is getting all the back to school supplies, snacks, and essentials you need. So here's your reminder to make your life a little easier this season. Shop favorites from Staples, Best Buy, and Costco, all delivered through Instacart, so that you can get some time back and do whatever it is that you need to get your life back on track. Instacart, we're here.
Starting a business can be overwhelming. You're juggling multiple roles: designer, marketer, logistics manager, all while bringing your vision to life. But for millions of businesses, Shopify is the ultimate partner. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, and 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. From household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Build a stunning online store with Shopify's ready-to-use templates. Boost content with AI-powered product descriptions, page headlines, and enhanced photography. Marketing is easy with built-in tools for email and social media campaigns. Plus, Shopify simplifies everything from inventory to shipping and returns. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try. Shopify.com/try.
And our second story today comes from Madelynn. My husband and I pulled off the long dirt road lined with woods. We came into the driveway. A clearing cut out with an ancient homestead, a yard filled with mismatched trees, a junk-filled field for a backyard, and a barn that was somehow still standing. You know how great-grandparents' houses are. We were there to meet a distant cousin and her family to pick up an item. Her 2 sons were running around playing in the yard. We walked into the house and were mortified. A hoarder's house. I immediately became overwhelmed and asked my husband if he would be willing to take over so I could breathe outside. I was pregnant and emotional and I could feel the claustrophobia kicking in. He sweetly agreed, like he usually does. I walked outside to inspect the junk littered throughout the field. It reminded me of childhood, when I used to dig through the mounds of dirt looking for treasure that only ever turned out to be old, broken dishes. I was looking quite curiously at an old air tank when a loud, clear whistle reached my ears. I naturally assumed it was the young boys, until they frantically came running around the side of the house, yelling something about how it mimicked them. I turned to meet them as they gulped to catch their breath between excited chatter. "We were whistling and then something in the woods across the road whistled back at us," they exclaimed. So that was what I had heard. My immediate thought was, the Pied Piper. I'm a firm believer in things that we cannot see and have had a few spooky experiences. I calmly instructed them not to look into the tree line and suggested that we should go inside to their parents. We left the edge of the field and began the short walk back down to the house. But it was all around us that fast. An eerie, melodic symphony poured down from the treetops and crawled up our skin. It sounded like a chant. The Fae, I thought. I had no calm left. "Run!" I screamed. We bolted down the yard and through the front door. Everyone turned to look at us, faces filled with confusion, as we all shouted over the top of one another. My husband, being as fearless as he is, marched outside to investigate with my uncle close on his heels. My aunt just shook her head and muttered something about her son doing those drugs again. I watched through the door as the men stood and looked around. It appeared normal, until I saw the expressions on their faces shift from stoicism to intrigue to dread. I swung the door open and my husband yelled, "You'll never guess what we just heard," as he and my uncle inspected a tree in the yard. My heart dropped as I screamed at them, begged them to stop looking and messing with the trees. My aunt and cousins came out, with the older at her elbow, trying to convince her he hadn't taken anything, that this was all real. She stomped towards the field on an unknown mission while the rest of us attempted to decipher what in the world was going on here. "Maybe it's because of the cliff," one of the cousins shouted as he pointed at a small clearing in the trees across the road. A faint outline of a cliff was visible. That made a lot of sense to me. I had read that the Fae are often found near dramatic landscapes such as cliffs. We turned to see my aunt dragging a giant limb from the field into the yard. "You sure it wasn't just a limb you all heard falling over the cliff?" As our eyes followed her across the yard, I saw an apparition of 2 women in white dresses with suspiciously long arms follow her out and then disappear into the yard. I made eye contact with my husband, and the look of horror on his face let me know that he saw them too. We needed to get out of there. I would not recommend going through those trees or near that cliff. This is a space occupied by other creatures, and they have made themselves abundantly known. I certainly will not be disrespecting their space by going over there, and I really don't think that you should either. My aunt looked positively annoyed, but she heeded my warning, dropped her limb, and marched back towards the field. "There's a hill with a clearing at the top. Maybe I can see something from there." She was bound and determined to come up with any other solution than the one that I had given her. The hill in question wasn't huge. It was beyond the field, back behind the barn. It did in fact have a clearing on top, with a giant ritualistic looking stone placed smack in the centre. The sky met the clearing in a magical display of light against dark clouds. The self-proclaimed photographer in me couldn't pass up the photo opportunity, even under these circumstances. I pulled out my phone, but it had gotten stuck on some weird fisheye-like setting. I was attempting to zoom in, so that it would focus on the sky at the top of the hill, but somehow, because of the angle, I could see the top of the hill from an almost aerial perspective. I saw my aunt climbing up and stepping into the dirt circle clearing at the top. I saw her approach the rock in the middle. I saw a dark shadow figure dart into the clearing behind her. I saw darkness engulf my blurry vision as I attempted to scream, with no sound escaping from my throat. I saw the daylight pouring through my bedroom window as I opened my eyes. It was only a dream. A dream that shook up my insides and left goosebumps on my skin. 3:30 a.m. The numbers on my clock lit up with a mocking glare. I had to pee. I'm currently 11 weeks pregnant and I never knew I would be waking up to pee every night this early on. Annoyed, I kicked the covers off of me and stood up to face the very dark but very short walk to my bedroom door, which I always sleep with closed and locked. I did my business and shuffled my way back to my room in a sleepy daze. As I approached the entrance to my bedroom, I had the distinct and alarming thought. I shouldn't leave my door open when I go to the bathroom. Anything could come in. The thought was jarring. It was subconscious. But I brushed it aside and proceeded to enter my bedroom, even though the darkness looked darker than usual, sticky somehow. I closed the door behind me, locked it, and crawled back into bed. It was a very stormy early morning. I lay facing my French doors that led off onto the patio. I watched as the windows lit up in different patterns with the lighting that was occurring. As I watched, movement caught my eye. My eyes trailed down the window and landed right at the edge of my bed. My eyes slammed shut like a bear trap, as if my body saw something my mind wasn't registering. It felt like I had made eye contact with something. I lay there motionless and absolutely terrified. I could feel my heartbeat pulsating throughout my entire body as my mind reeled with possibilities of what in the world was going on. I lay there for what felt like hours, my body becoming stiff with adrenaline. It then dawned on me that whatever it was could be feeding off my fear. I slowed my heart rate with breathing techniques as I reminded myself that it couldn't harm me unless I let it. At least I read somewhere that's how it worked, and it was all I had to hold on to in that moment. After what seemed like hours, I somehow managed to calm myself down and had collected enough bravery to roll away from it, and out loud I said, "I feel you in here, and you are not welcome here. I'm a being of light and love, and anything lower than my vibration is not welcome in this space. Leave now." Immediately I fell back asleep. I woke up the next morning and saged the absolute shit out of my room, while saying my own simple yet personal and effective cleansing spell. My room is a safe space, and I have marked it as such. I haven't felt something cross the threshold of my room for years, but that thing had some nerve. Disrespectful old spooky. It genuinely always baffles me that people are out here having coherent dreams. Dreams that have a narrative, a beginning, middle and end, that deal with real people and real situations. My dreams are just abstract nonsense with sort of sections of vague reality. And I can understand why that dream had a profound impact on you. And I would love to know if that place, if that place, your great grandparents' place, if it's a real place, but also if it did hold a feeling of magical significance when you used to visit there. Is it a place that makes you, that made you go, oh, something feels interesting here, that your brain has held on to and is kind of trying to process in the form of dreams? But it does sound like a terrifying dream to have sort of this sound, this whistling cascading from the trees, and then to see these women in white dresses with disproportionately long arms, and to have this ritualistic stone on top of a hill, and all of that is very disturbing. Although I have heard that when you are pregnant that you have more vivid dreams. I don't know how true that is. And as for your 3:30 a.m. visitor, do you know what? I would be so pissed off. Can you not just wee in peace? And I think there's something about that primal state of not really asleep, not really awake, kind of dozy, dazed state that does feel very otherworldly. I definitely spoke about this maybe in the last mini episode, but how, is it possible that that primal otherworldly state allows us to connect with something other? And I hate to say it, right? But Madeline, I'm going to say it and I'm really sorry. Is that thing sitting at the edge of your bed watching you on the reg? And it's only then that you realised and noticed? Because if so, as I always say, get a life, or at least get a hobby in death. You know what I mean? Stop sitting around watching people sleep. It's weird. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to Zara and Madelynn for sending in your stories. Remember, the last story came from the 17th of April 2025. And if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you can get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
Popsicles, sprinklers, a cool breeze. Talk about refreshing. You know what else is refreshing this summer? A brand new phone with Verizon. Yep, get a new phone on any plan with Select Phone Trade-in and My Plan. And lock down a low price for 3 years on any plan with My Plan. This is a deal for everyone, whether you're a new or existing customer. Swing by Verizon today for our best phone deals. 3-year price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate only. Additional terms and conditions apply for all offers.